All right. Welcome back to your locally owned, locally operated media podcast, The Local Lens. I am Adam Dobbins, Director of Sales here at Walnut Media, and I am joined by my compadre, the Senior Elite Account Executive, nominated for Account Executive of the Year from the Radio Wayne Awards, Mr. Andrew Botwinick.
Thank you. And as you said, welcome back.
Yeah.
We got a busy one today. We got a lot of stuff to go over.
We do. We had some good feedback and some nice listenership on the first episode. So we're going to continue to pump these out. There's so many different topics for us to talk about, and we're really excited to dive into them. But one of the things, and this is going to be transparent across all kinds of different industries, but especially in media, a big thing that we wanted to focus on is culture. I think with the media landscape, how it's changing and evolving from day to day, month to month, year to year, that it's, I think a lot of media companies are struggling pretty bad with culture. And if they even have a culture at all, I want to talk to you today about how you feel about the importance of company culture and how it can help drive results. And you and I have both had some very specific experiences in different places and different atmospheres and landscapes where, you know, some good things have really molded us. And I always say I try to learn as much from the bad as I do the good, because it makes you really appreciate the good, but it makes you be able to navigate the bad and make bad situations like that better in the future.
Well, and I've been lucky enough to have two different occasions before coming here onto Walnut Media where it was two drastically different cultures to start my career. And then coming here, you get kind of the best of both worlds. The very first place that I started out in media professionally, it was a smaller market. It was just a staff of about 5 or 6 people full-time. We had a few part-timers that would help out call games and that kind of stuff. But it felt like we were more of a team collectively. And when you looked at the different markets that they had stations in, it kind of felt like, and I'm sure you felt this at previous places that you've been at, where it was every market was kind of pitted against themselves.
Yeah.
And it wasn't more of a us against everybody else type of mentality. It was, okay, what is this station versus this station that's a direct competition? And then the second place, I know you and I had experienced the same kind of culture at that second place where we both were at. It was like the exact opposite. It was very much every person for themselves, and you'd be lucky to get a conversation with someone who's been there for longer than a year, more than 30 seconds.
Yeah. So when I started out, it was at a media company where everybody at our specific station was remote. And whenever we would get together for meetings, it was like a group of individuals getting together. There was not the collaborative atmosphere. You really felt like you were on your own, kind of doing your own thing. And it was an odd dynamic. And I felt very separated from the organization. It didn't really feel like, it was a great group of people and a phenomenal company. I can't say enough good things about it. It was essentially part of there was just not room in the building to have account executives there. So they weren't able to do it. They were a victim of circumstance with that. So you totally get that. But moving on to the one that you were referencing, there was a media company where you kind of came in and it was a very cold, stale atmosphere. And you're like hoping coming in, hey, this is going to hopefully be this team atmosphere where people lift each other up, that we're going to be able to collaborate. Other account executives are going to share ideas. We're going to celebrate wins together. If we get shot down on a proposal, maybe we can get together with the group of our peers and talk about how that happened. And that couldn't have been more opposite or farther from the truth.
Oh, exactly. And the very first experience that I had in media professionally, similar to what you had said, it was exactly what I needed at that time. Yeah. Even though everybody was kind of spaced out, and I kind of mentioned it was different markets, it was awesome. I loved it. And the small team that we had locally, it felt as though everybody was rowing in the same direction, and it was where we needed to go. And then, going from that, where it was all, no one had really been in media sales at the first location I was at. We'd all kind of been placed just because of the circumstances. I know we had, whenever I was there, our director of sales left, and that was actually how I got into sales to begin with. Was just because we had a void, and I had an advertising minor, and I went to school for it. So they said, go in and see what you can do.
Yeah.
And so after I kind of learned that is when I moved to the market that I'm currently in now, with that other station that you and I had talked about. And that was exactly similar to what you had said, where it was like I went in and I had been in media selling for maybe a year, 2 years, probably closer to that 2-year mark. But I was still new enough to where I desperately needed someone to kind of not tell me how to do it, but just explain stuff from more of a veteran perspective of here's how it should look. How are you not from point A to point B yet?
Yeah. And it was difficult to get that veteran perspective because the majority of the account executive staff at this organization was remote, and they would work maybe 1 day a week in-house. But when it's just that 1 day a week in-house, that's not enough to build a bond. And we all know, working in media, you see a lot of account executives that don't make it, that come in, they aren't willing to put in the work, or they don't have the talent ability to get the job done. I mean, I honestly think that it's less than 1% of the population that can do this job at a high level. I really do, after I've been in this long enough. So I get where the perspective was a little bit, where a guy, I followed you in the door there within a month probably. Yeah. And, we're sitting there and literally nobody would talk to us. Like, I don't think I had a conversation in that media company other than leadership, but with anyone that was at a peer level other than you for the first 6 months I was there.
Yeah. Well, and it was likely the same on my end, other than a few small blip conversations. I know there was one other person that had only been there for a few years that I had talked to occasionally, but yeah, it was very much a kind of an awakening of like, oh my gosh, well, how are we going to get this set up? And I know you and I kind of set the tempo for what it should like, where it can be fun.
Yeah.
And it's not just solely numbers, meetings, proposals, all that stuff that you do in sales. You can have a little bit of fun with it and not make it to where you're distracted the whole day, we had some fun, basically, is where I'm going with it.
So I remember the day that you and I were looking at each other, and we had kind of I think that was the moment that we became, not just colleagues, but we're, friends for life at that point.
Yeah.
And we were it was the President's Club celebration at this media company, and neither one of us had been there long enough to be inducted in President's Club. So I remember sitting there, and it pissed me off. I was really agitated and annoyed because I'm like, I'm going to be up here next year, and it bothered me so much so to the point where the president of that media company pulled me into his office, and he's like, "Was there something I said that made you mad?" And I'm like, No, because he was roasting a bunch of us, and because he's got a great sense of humor and a really good guy. And I'm like, not at all. I said I was thinking about. I was plotting my moves because I'm going to be in President's Club next year. And he was like, I love that. And I was laser focused for it. And I went back to my desk, and I remember I looked at you, and I knew that the only culture we were going to get in that building and the only type of support we were really going to get is probably from each other. And I remember looking at you and saying, here's the deal. You and we're going to hold each other accountable. And we're going to help each other. We're going to support each other. We're going to celebrate each other's wins. We're going to collaborate on proposals together. And we're going to create our own culture, because we don't have one here. It's an empty, kind of soulless place. At least on the sales side it was. For the on-air talent, I can't speak for that because it seemed like they had a lot more going on. But we were like, we're going to create our own thing here. And we really, at that point, started collaborating on proposals together, leaning on each other. If one of us was in a slump, we'd help talk the other one out of it. And I know it helped me raise my game to a whole nother level.
Well, and you talk about the culture, and I'll actually pull out a second prop. I know we've got the one prop on the table.
We got props?
Yeah, no, this was the one.
No, you didn't bring this.
I always have it, and I'll try and get it onto the camera here.
People are going to think we're insane.
No, this was, and for the listeners that are listening to this podcast only, Adam and I had, when we were at this previous media company, we'd kind of made a pact, and it was something that you had done. It was like at the Dollar Tree or something like that.
Yes,
Very small, like minimal cost, but it's these little tiny gnome figurines tangerines. And it was, you brought him into the office one day, and it was once we had started to get other people on board with what we were doing and trying to change that culture. It was a good luck gnome, and it was a sales good luck gnome. And from that day on, I think I always have had, it's part of my morning ritual, is I put it in my pocket and I have it with me all times throughout the day. And that's just, now it's at a habit of doing it. But at the beginning, it was like, okay, now I know if worst comes to worst, if I need help with something, Adam can help me out. Or we had started to get more people on board with what we were doing, and people started to talk to us more and started to collaborate more. And it went from, like you had said, where it was remote, there was hardly anybody in the office, to people could call each other whenever they actually needed help, and you'd get responses from some of the people that were not responding previously.
Yeah, I remember how ridiculous that was, because we brought that gnome up, and then as soon as we got a couple of those gnomes handed out, and we're like, oh, we were closing deals left and right, and really helping clients grow their business. And we were like, okay, these things legitimately are like kind of good luck. And then it was like, all of a sudden, the rest of the staff, who we had literally no relationship with, wanted one, and was like, why didn't I get a gnome? What the hell? And it's like, do you even know my name? I'm surprised that you're even talking to me now, because again, it was the beginnings of that building starting to see that we were building a culture within a culture that wasn't really there, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that bodes with what we're going to be talking about next year with recruitment. Is finding not only the right people that fit that culture that you're looking for, but making sure that it's competitive, but not overly competitive. And I think that's what we've kind of captured lightning in a bottle with here, where it's everybody can kind of trash talk other markets, just jokingly, like making humor. I know we do that with some of the other people in the other offices. But at the end of the day, we all know that we would take the shirt off our back and give it to them if they really needed it.
Yeah. And that's the special thing that, at the media company that we're at now is, we're just really, really lucky that our leadership is like, hey guys, you're the culture, you build it. You guys are it's going to be, the people at the front lines are what's going to make this. And we've been given the freedom to come in and really help make this a special place with the support of our leadership, and make it so that account executives and other people in the building don't feel like that it's just them working on their own, that they're completely on their own. If you get thrown in the deep end, you have to swim. We have account executives that go with other account executives on meetings, and the other AEs contribute in the training process, and we all celebrate each other's victories and lift each other up. And it's not an every man for themselves type of mentality. Number one, it's like being on a sports team that, we're playing football. Yeah, you want to be the best player on the team, but more than anything, you want the team to win. And that is the priority. And I feel like that's what we've created here. And that's, it's the extended version of the beginnings of what we had started at that previous media company years ago.
Yeah. And I think it's really taken hold, and that's what kind of makes it fun. And I know people, it's cliche to say, but it's the difference between waking up and dreading going into work and waking up and going, oh my gosh, I get to go in and hang out with people that I enjoy working alongside. And yes, I'm still doing my job, and I'm doing it with people that I enjoy doing it with.
Yeah.
But it's not something where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Tuesday or it's Thursday, I have to go into the office and I got to make calls all day long. I don't regret going in and making calls all day long if that's what it takes to get done, just for the fact that I know that the person to my left and the person to my right are doing the same thing.
Yeah. And you guys are collaborating, you're working together, you're helping each other, you're bouncing ideas off of one another. And the great part is, I say this all the time, is when I get to come into work on Monday, I don't have to, I get to, and I get to see some of the coolest people that I've ever met, and I get to work with them every single day. And that's a huge blessing that most people don't have, that I don't think we take for granted, or anyone else here takes for granted. That's very, very important. And I know from the interview process, and we're talking about, again, recruitment, we're kind of easing into that, is I know from a leadership perspective, we've interviewed lots of people that we think, they probably do pretty well here, but do they fit the vibe? Do they fit the culture? Are they going to get along with everyone? Are they going to be supportive? Are they going to be a contributing member of the team? Or are they going to be kind of out in left field on their own, doing their own thing? And we passed on a lot of people where we feel like they're just not going to make the team as a whole better.
Right. And there's a quote. I don't remember. I don't have anybody to attribute the quote to, but I know it's a quote that's actually been said before. Is everybody in your life that you work with or you interact with each day is either an asset or a liability, and you have to figure out which one it is. And if they're an asset, continue working with them, keep them in your circle. If they're a liability, you got to know that they're a liability. And even if they may be the most awesome person ever, but if they create more problems for you than they solve, maybe the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time around. And I wish I would have known that and believed that at a younger age, because you can have the ability to be an unbelievably impressive human being, but if you're hanging out with a bunch of lower level people with low aspirations, you might be the top level performer in that low level group, but they're not going to bring the best out in you. And I've seen it day after day after day. You want to surround yourself with people that you aspire to be like, people around you that you admire. That's why I think it's important to make sure, there's a lot of leaders that are afraid to hire people that they think are better than them. I'm the opposite. I want to surround myself with people that complement my weaknesses and push me to be better every single day. And that's how I'm going to be the best leader I can possibly be. And tying back to, that was one thing that I noticed when I came to our current organization for the very first time. I was blown away. Now, did we have a lot of things that we needed to work on? Yes. Do we still? Yes, all of us do. All media companies have things they need to work on and get better at. But the place had a soul, and it had a team. It was a family, and I'd never experienced that before, and I was blown away. I felt like coming from this is it sounds a little dramatic, but kind of a dark, cold place to okay, this is warm, this is great. I feel supported and appreciated, and I felt that more and within a couple days than I had in the year that I'd been in the previous organization.
Well, and on the sales side of it, when you're out and you're selling the services and the stations and the digital marketing and every other thing under the umbrella that you guys have at the companies you're at, it helps if you personally enjoy going into work every single day versus if you don't enjoy it, you're going to be less passionate about what you have and what you have the ability to offer for your clients, and it will show in the meetings. I know we're going to talk about some of those stuff later on in the process of the CNA with client needs analysis. But I think that's huge. Being able to have that culture impact you as a person positively, it shows when you meet with clients and you talk about everything that you have going on at your stations, or how you can use certain properties and strategies to help solve whatever problem the client needs.
People can feel that when you're talking to clients. They can sense that there's depth behind your message and what you're talking about. That you go into a meeting and you can bring the president of the company with you, or another account executive, or a member of your digital team. And that's where I think there's a massive gap between remote and in-house work. I'm a big advocate for being in-house. And I know a lot of people think that remote might be better. And I'd love to hear any sort of opinion on that. I think that there's valid points to all, but I find it very difficult to build a culture and have an environment where you can be as productive as you want to be and as cohesive as you want to be in a remote workspace. I think a remote workspace promotes individualism and segregation amongst people, especially account executives, whereas in-house brings a team closer together and you're way more collaborative.
And going back to the sales side of it all, if you are working remote, more times than not, you're more likely to set up a Zoom call or a Teams call. And for the client side of it, it's not as engaging as if you are physically meeting with them at a coffee shop or at their place of business or wherever it may be. I know yesterday we had a meeting where there was 3 of us on the meeting, and I easily could have done it by myself, but I brought the 2 other people that went with me because it was on-air talent, and you had came with me as well too, just to kind of illustrate the same points that I was going to be making. But it's engaging for the client to see 3 people took time out of their day to meet with me to talk about my business and how they can help. And it just kind of shows.
Yeah. It does. And they can feel that there's a collective excitement. There is an organization behind that proposal that's ready to attack it and make sure that it's effective. It's not a one-man show, that's doing it. We have a whole team and a whole family behind this that's going to ensure that this is successful. And, I can tell you that if you walk through and tour our building and then walk through, and I've done it myself at one of the national media conglomerates, and you walk through and it is a ghost town. It's empty. It's dark. There's empty cubicles everywhere. And it's one of the biggest media companies in the world. And you walk through and it was like, okay, this is not what I was expecting at all. I thought it was going to be, and I was going to feel alive when I walked in, and that there was going to be people walking around shouting, yelling, high-fiving, sharing ideas, that there was going to be energy just jumping out of the walls, and I was going to be inspired. And it was exactly the opposite. I walked out from that tour initially thinking, man, I'm going to join this organization. This is one of the biggest media organizations on the planet. It would be a huge honor to be able to be there. And I had made up my mind walking in the door that this was going to be my decision. I was going to go there. And then I walked in and felt absolutely zero soul, zero depth, zero teamwork, zero collaboration, zero energy in the building. And that's hard to do in a room full of dim cubicles.
Well, and it helps too having people in-house. I know we're big in doing parades, doing local events, going out to remotes. And if we're at a car show somewhere over the weekend, most of the people on staff try and go out to that car show. And it helps in the sales process, because if you're meeting with a client and they have a car show coming up or they have an event coming up, you can say, oh, well, last week we went and did this. Here's some pictures from it, blah, 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 whatever it may be. It helps build you credibility and shows that you're putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
And you're not just saying, oh yeah, well, we're a station that does this, this, and this. I haven't been to any of the events or I haven't done any of the local stuff, but seeing the passion behind when you're in a parade line and you see your station coming up and all the people just immediately get up, start dancing to the music, or excited that they see people that have been doing radio for 35, 40 years.
Yeah.
And it speaks volumes more than just a one-sheeter would say.
You feel that energy unlike any other way you possibly can. And that's what we always tell people. If you don't feel the vibe, go to a parade and see how people freak out when they see your stations. And if you don't feel that for the company that you work for, and you don't feel that sense of belonging and that pride, where if you see your quarterly sales report come out and the company is struggling, if that doesn't hurt you and make you feel bad, then you're at the wrong place. You need to go to a place where you care, where you're invested. And, we always talk about here is we're not part owners, but we sure feel like it. I take it personally that we're successful here because I believe in this place so much. This is such a unique, amazing culture and full of so many amazing people. We have the best ownership in, I would say, probably the country as far as media. I can't imagine that there's other ownership from a media company like we have, where we get the support and the essentially like, hey guys, what do you need from us? Because you're out there doing this every day, and we just want to help you guys be better at what you do and be able to serve your clients at the highest level. You typically don't get that from ownership. From ownership, it's more like, all right, let's talk about downsizing. We didn't hit revenue goals, so we're going to be cutting some positions. And it's sad to see that that's what our industry is becoming right now, that we're hearing about people, especially on-air talent, losing their jobs all the time, and people that are on the digital side, even with digital being the fastest growing sector of the media company right now, there's still people in that end that are losing their jobs, which to me is absolutely insane.
Right. And when you mention a good point, I think that's a great segue for the last 5 or 6 minutes here to get into the client needs analysis portion of it. When you talk about downsizing and the immediate sales pressure that the account executives feel, knowing that at the end of the day, if they don't get back and make their budget, and the meeting that they go on, even though it's supposed to be a client needs analysis, they try and rush it and pitch them something that immediate first meeting.
Yeah.
That's not how you're supposed to do it. And that helps. If you've got a good sales culture, in your back pocket, I don't have to pressure as much to get a sale in the very first meeting. I can just literally sit there and listen, ask a few questions, get them to engage, tell me what their problems are, and then I can go back, strategize, come back same week, following week, and show them what I was taking notes on and how we can help. Whereas instead of it going, well, I have a small amount of budget, blah, 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 and then immediately going, oh, well, we just pulled this thing off the printer, take a look at it. And I think that helps with client needs analysis and knowing that I don't have that sales pressure to pitch something the very first meeting, because more times than not, they're just going to say no.
Well, and I think from a leadership perspective too, I'm kind of speaking for you here, so if I'm wrong, you tell me, but I think it helps to have a member of leadership there with you, showing you support when you're doing a CNA and helping maybe ask questions that didn't get hit, or thinking of ideas that maybe were brought up to the stage. So to me, that was one thing that I wanted to make sure that when I became a sales leader, that I was able to provide account executives with maybe a level of support that I had never really previously gotten. And in that CNA process, the account executives to feel like, hey, like my sales leader is side by side with me, trying to help get this done. They're not sitting behind their desk in their office, putting heat and pressure on me that I need to close this. They're in it with me.
Right. And relationship building is exactly what you and I have talked about in the first episode, now in this episode too. It's the important building block of getting a sale, is having that relationship with the client. I know our president says this all the time. It's engraved in the back of my mind. Clients move at the speed of trust.
Yes.
And in the very first meeting, if I go on to a meeting with Adam and we sit there and we talk with the client and they're telling us all about their business, all about them, their family life, if they've got kids, if they've got pets, how long they've been doing this in the industry, what got them into the industry, and you're asking genuine questions, not because you're writing stuff down to tee up we've got this incredible opportunity that's only available right now if you say yes to it. It's because we want to genuinely know more about you and not leverage that in a conversation later on. And then we can go back, build what we need to build. Yep. And they know that if we ask them out to go to lunch or something, it's not always going to be we get 20 minutes into the lunch and it's, okay, here's what we've got to pitch you.
Yeah. And, a huge part of that too, we've talked about this a lot lately, is, when you go into that meeting too, it's, you're not there to sell, you're there to build a relationship. And if you're there to build a relationship and learn about their business, then you're going to be moving things in the right direction. And part of that process is being able to have the ability to observe the room, observe the client, actually listen. From an account executive perspective, you need to do a lot more listening than you do talking. And I think too many of us in this role like to talk too much and don't listen enough. And I think of one perspective client who's one of our favorite clients. We go in and we tell this story all the time, but I could think of probably 20 other stories that we go in and we're just having great conversation with the client. And we look over and his phone case is an old cassette tape deck that, I don't know, it's kind of not a true cassette tape, but it looks like, from the 80s. And so it's like, all right, this guy's a big fan of the 80s. And we happen to have a new package, 80s at 8, that we were promoting with Neil at Night. And so right away, the conversation goes right into that. And that just makes sense because we're observant of our surroundings and looking around the room and noticing. You should be able to leave every meeting and name 5 or 6 things that were in that room and about another 5 or 6 things about that client. But that one little thing that we noticed about his phone case ended up giving a relationship with, they're now the title sponsor for the 80s at 8 promotion because they love 80s music and 80s pop culture. And if we weren't paying attention to that, we never would have noticed at all.
When an easy early on account executives, and I've been in this mindset before, so I'm not excluding myself from this. I used to go on CNAs when I was first getting into media and I had no idea what I was doing. And I would ask a question, tell me a little bit more about your business. As they're answering the question, I'm thinking of 2 or 3 other questions. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, okay, well, if they mention this, maybe I'll bring up this, or, oh, they said this. That means I should segue into this. Just listen. Listen to what they say. And like Adam said, observe.
Slow down.
Something that's in the corner of their office that's important to them, if you just even quickly ask them, hey, I see that you have a model Corvette in your office. Are you a big fan of Corvettes? Do you have one? That gets them talking, and then they open up conversation, and it could lead to something. It could just be important information to where the next time you see them, you ask them about their Corvette. Oh, I remember you saying that last week you were going to get your brakes changed on the Corvette that you have. Did that go well? Was it expensive? I know sometimes on Corvette brakes, whatever it may be, it's leading up for conversation in the future.
Yeah, you want to be taking almost not quite as many, but about as many notes about the client themselves, their family, their friends, their interests, their hobbies, as you are the actual business, because that's a huge part, is learning about them and building that relationship. And you want to have more depth than the average account executive that's just going in trying to pitch a package and close a sale that day. Now, let's be honest, there is clients that are really, really hard to pin down. And sometimes you go into those meetings and you're like, "Oh, all right, I need to get something in front of them now because I might not be able to get another meeting." So we know those things happen, but be in it for the relationship and for the long haul and for doing what's right for the client. And you're always going to be operating in the right frame of mind, and you're going to be a lot more successful. Your client, their campaign's going to be a lot more successful. So yeah, the ability to observe and listen are two things that I think a lot of AEs miss the boat on big time.
Yeah, and I know we could go way, way, way more in depth with questions on the client needs analysis process. What would be good questions to ask? Which ones are probably ones you should stray away from?
We should do another episode on that. I think we could go way deeper into it.
I think so too. I think we spent a lot of time talking about culture because that is important.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the next one we might look at doing a little bit more in depth on client needs analysis.
And to tie back before we finish off, guys, just take a minute and evaluate your culture in the building that you're working in, and say, am I getting the support that I need? Am I supporting the other account executives in the building at the level that I need to? It's not all about them supporting you. You got to support them just as much. It's a team effort. And that's what makes a team start to be great. And I can tell you that even in a building where there's not a great culture and a lot of support, you take it upon your shoulders to start to build that and change things. And you're going to start to notice that you attract a lot more bees with honey. And you're going to have a lot more people that are going to want to be around you and be a part of that positive culture, because it's a lot more infectious than that cold, dreary, dark one when people don't talk to each other at all and just do their own thing.
Right. And it makes everybody's life a little bit easier. Everybody has a little bit more fun. The rest of the day goes by a little bit quicker. Your 8 to 5, your 9 to 5 isn't a true 9-hour, 8-hour day. It feels like it's just a few blips of a couple hours.
Yeah. It's your work family, man. You gotta enjoy it. And hopefully you're working with a lot of people that you love to be with and love to collaborate with and love to work with. We're pretty lucky to be able to do that here every day. But now is the time. We got to get out of here, folks. We went over our time slot, so we're going to be pushed out. But I just want to thank you guys again for listening to the Local Lens Media Podcast. Make sure, please, take time to like, subscribe, share it out to everyone that you think would be interested, that would benefit from this, so we can get out in front of more people that the podcast can help. And if there is anything that you guys think that we should talk about or that you disagree with, make sure to leave some comments and let us know. And guys, always, what we always say when we end, you got to be known before you're needed. So good luck out there.